Hey everybody, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here to bring you our hitter section for today, Thursday, July 9th. The idea of this hitter section is we go over some of the pitchers that we think are guys you should target against. We look into the numbers, we see where their weaknesses are, and then we try to point out guys on the opposing team who are in the best spot or profile to be the guys who should be able to take advantage of those weaknesses. So we go pitcher by pitcher, we break down where you can attack them and the kind of bats that we want to take against them. And then we go and look at the hitters and we figure out which guys, make sense to be the guys that should be in good spots to, have a good performance today. The first guy that we're going to talk about is Michael Lorenzen from the Cincinnati Reds. He's allowed left-handed bats to hit .298 against them with 6 home runs in 23 innings pitched. He has a whip against left-handers of 1.83. Now, this is actually bad news for him because he's going up against the Miami Marlins team that most people sleep on because they don't have Giancarlo Stanton, but they do have a lot of left-handed bats that can do some damage against Lorenzen today. On the top of the order, you have a guy like D. Gordon. He's hitting .343 against right-handed pitching this year with 21 stolen bases. So against a guy like Lorenzen that has a high batting average, D. Gordon should be able to get on base, and anytime he gets on base, he's always off to the races. Cincinnati hasn't been great this year at throwing out runners, so I definitely think that if he gets on, he's going to be stealing. And especially on a site like DraftKings where the stolen base is worth a lot for you, I think he's a guy that can get you that single stolen base run scored and come up with 10 points in one at-bat for you. So I definitely think D. Gordon is somebody that you might want to consider. He's a great cash game play because if he does that, he's going to return 2 times his salary or more for you. And he can do that more than once. So he's also somebody that you can put into your tournament lineups and have some real upside with. Another guy who's been hot lately is Christian Yelich. Yelich is now batting in the 2-hole for that Miami team. He's another left-handed batter who profiles to do well against Lorenzen. His numbers aren't all that great this year. He was hurt a little bit earlier in the year. But if you remember back to last season, this guy was one of the young studs that people were expecting to be a breakout star this year. And now that he's healthy and hitting the ball a little bit better, I definitely think Yelich is another guy that you might want to look at today. If you put him and Gordon together, you got 2 left-handed bats right on top of that order. And makes for a nice little stack of guys that should be getting on base for them. And the reason why you care if those guys get on base is because you can also look at a guy like Justin Bour. Justin Bour has this insane power. He's got a .270 batting average this year with 10 home runs and only 137 at-bats against right-handed pitching. Now, the thing that you want Bour for is he's the guy that's going to, knock in those runners up top. So if you wanted to stack up a couple of the guys on that Miami team for a tournament, I think if you have guys like Gordon, Yelich, and Bour, you got a whole bunch of left-handers that profile to do real well against Michael Lorenzen. The one drawback you want to think about anytime you take guys against Cincinnati, though, is most likely in the 8th or 9th inning, you're going to have Aroldis Chapman come in. And basically, if you don't get your damage done in the early innings against them, once Chapman comes in there, he's pretty much lights out with a lot of strikeout potential. So if you're playing on a site where they take away for strikeouts, there's a good chance that, you might get some at the end of the game if they put that guy in there because he throws hard and, he's been missing a lot of bats this year. The next pitcher I want to talk about is Mike Pelfrey. Pelfrey actually is a reverse splits guy. Right-handed bats have had a higher batting average against them over the course of the last 3 years. There's one guy in particular who kind of stands out for me in this game for Detroit to take against them, and that's Yoenis Cespedes. He's up to hitting second in that order for Detroit right now. He's got a .318 batting average with 9 home runs and 263 at-bats this year. And the other guy who made sense to me when I looked at the numbers is J.D. Martinez. But just be careful with J.D. Martinez today. Late in the game yesterday, he took a fastball inside off his hand. And when you get hit in the hand, the hand is a big deal when you're trying to grip and swing a baseball bat. So just be careful. There's a chance. I know they said he was going to go get x-rays after the game. So there is a chance that he might be out today. Or even if he is in there, he might still be hurting from, catching a fastball off the knuckles yesterday. So just be careful with him. His price is up in a lot of places. Obviously, if he's healthy, he profiled out as a guy who would do very well in this game against Pelfrey. He's got 19 home runs this year, I think, against right-handed pitching. So, Martinez does have some power. He does hit right-handed pitching well, and this would be a good matchup for him. But just be careful. See, if any news comes out about how that hand is and how he's feeling, because he is pricey today. And if you're going to pay up for a guy, I kind of want to make sure the guy I'm paying up for is healthy. Next guy I want to talk about is somebody who I think is going to be a popular guy to target against. although I don't know how popular because I don't know how much people are going to really be willing to take the Atlanta Braves bats, even in Coors Field. That would be Kyle Kendricks. Now, Kendricks has been bad to both sides of the plate, and that's usually a good sign for a guy that you want to take and stack up a whole bunch of bats against, and definitely somebody that you want to take a couple bats against in your cash games. In Coors Field, you obviously are always going to get, guys that, that are going to be profiling in good spots. They have gotten a little bit of a price bump, but because all those Atlanta bats were so cheap, even with the price bump, they're still not very expensive. You can definitely put a couple of them in your lineup. Kendricks, let me just read you these numbers. 2014, he allowed a 265 batting average to right-handed bats, which is not great, but not horrible either. Left-handed bats hit 290 against him, so that was really the way to attack him. He gave up 12 homers to righties, 13 homers to lefties. In 2015, he has a 304 batting average against left-handed bats with 9 home runs already, and a 280 batting average to right-handed bats with 14 home runs already. So this is a guy who gives up a batting average in the high 280s to 300 to both sides of the plate, and also gives up a lot of home runs to both sides of the plate, which is why he's a good guy that I said you can stack against, because a lot of times you'll have somebody with extreme splits who is good against righties, not good against lefties. And the way that most managers have been building lineups lately with the lefty-righty split so that they can't bring in, one relief pitcher to pitch to everybody late in the games, it also kind of makes it tougher for you to stack a team like that because one guy might be in a good matchup while the other guy's in a bad one. Against Kyle Kendrick, everybody's in a good matchup. So you can take anybody in that order and put them in there, and they're probably going to have a plus matchup today. A couple of the guys I wanted to point out, Cameron Maybin has been on fire lately. He's got a 302 batting average with 5 home runs and 212 at-bats against right-handed pitching. But he has 84 DraftKings points in his last 7 games. So he's averaging over 12 points a game. His price is a little bit over $4,000 as an outfielder on DraftKings. And I definitely think he's the one guy on that Atlanta team who I think should be in a lot of people's lineups tonight, whether it's cash games or tournaments. I think he's a great option. He's been playing well. Josh was making a joke yesterday about he's been waiting for 10 years for Cameron Maybin to do what he's doing right now. But he's finally living up to the talent that people thought this guy had, and right now he's hot. So I definitely think he's somebody you should look at for your lineups. Another guy who's been on fire is Kelly Johnson. Kelly Johnson is batting in either the 3 or the 4 spot for that order right now, and he's been hitting. He's been hitting home runs left and right. So he's another guy who I think you can look for a cheap option. Think he's third base and outfield eligible on DraftKings. On some other sites, he's listed strictly as a third baseman, strictly as an outfielder in some other places, actually. So just see where he is, and if he fits into your lineup, he's a guy that definitely has some upside. And as we said, he's the home run hitter on that Atlanta team right now, and Kendricks is a guy who gives up a lot of home runs, so he profiles well against them. The other guy that profiles well against him is Nick Markakis. Markakis, you really got to watch the price on because obviously he's not a big upside guy. He hit cleanup for that Atlanta team for a while, but I don't even think he has a home run yet this year. So he's a guy that can get 2 or 3 hits for you, but he's not going to have that huge upside game. He's a good cash game option because he can get you a couple hits. He will drive in some runs. He hits in the middle of that order, so there's a chance that he gets driven in as well. But if you're expecting him to be the guy that wins you a GPP, it's very likely not going to happen. So that basically sums it up. Anybody on that Atlanta team, I think, is somebody who's in play. So even some of the other guys like an Uribe, I think you can look at. Jace Peterson, if he's leading off. Some of these guys are, going to be good values. And basically, every week, whoever's playing in Colorado, those guys are always in play for you. Next guy I want to talk about who I think we can target against is Severino Gonzalez of the Philadelphia Phillies. He has a very small sample size because he hasn't been up in the majors very long. But left-handed bats have hit him very well. 489 batting average right now with an ERA of 12.46 against lefties. So that's tough for him because he's going up against the Dodgers today. And as we know, the Dodgers have a lot of big left-handed bats. 2 guys who I think you can target and I think should be targeted. Yasmani Grandal has been hitting 5th in that order lately. He's got a 279 batting average against right-handed pitching with 14 home runs. So it's always tough to get home runs out of the catcher position. It's always tough to get upside. With Grandal hitting 5th in the order and his price still being kind of cheap, he's definitely somebody who should be on your short list to consider today. Another guy you can look at is Adrian Gonzalez. Now, Gonzalez has been banged up lately. And normally I wouldn't recommend him, but even with him being banged up, if you look at his game logs, I think he has like 3 home runs in his last 5 games, 4 double-digit DraftKings points. So you can't argue with the production that he has. Whether he's injured or not, he's been producing, and his price has come down. He's in the low 4s compared to, paying up to almost $6,000 for guys like Pujols and Goldie this week. You've been able to get a guy like Gonzalez for 4,400 on DraftKings, in the low 3,000s over on FanDuel. So this is definitely a guy that you want to consider and have on your radar. Like I said, be a little bit cautious. He has been banged up lately, but he's been banged up and producing. So as long as he's producing, you really can't argue. You can also look at a guy like Jock Peterson if you wanted to, or you have a guy like Justin Turner who does well against right-handed pitching. I don't know how Severino Gonzalez does against right-handers. There really isn't a very big sample size to make any, to draw any real conclusions against, but I do know he's very bad against lefties. So if you want to target some of those lefties against him, that looks to be the path of least resistance, basically. Let's see, who else do we have here? Couple other pitchers that I think we can look at. We can look at a guy like Brett Oberholzer today. He's actually been kind of a reverse splits guy. Left-handed batters have hit higher and better against him over the course of the last 3 seasons, and that doesn't work out really well for him today either, because he's going up against a Cleveland team that does have a lot of lefties in it, but the lefties they have do hit left-handed pitching pretty well. They have the 7th highest batting average against left-handed pitching and the 4th lowest K percentage against lefties. So it's definitely not a good spot for Oberholzer, and I think that Cleveland should be able to get to him. Cleveland's favored in this one. I think they're a minus 125 right now, and I think it's 7.5 runs that are expected, or maybe 8. So they're not expecting a ton of runs in this game, but they are expecting Cleveland to get 4 or 5 of them and wind up being the victors. The one guy who I really like in this matchup against Oberholzer is Michael Brantley. Brantley hits left-handed pitching really well. Last year he hit 307 against lefties, and this year he's at 287. So despite being a left-handed bat, he's somebody I think that you can look at and be in play. Anytime there's a lefty on the mound going up against Cleveland, you always got to look at a guy like Ryan Rayburn. His price is dirt cheap everywhere. He's a platoon splits guy, only plays against the lefties, but if you look at his numbers against lefties, they're elite. He's hitting high up in the 300s. He has a ton of doubles, a couple home runs to go with it. And this is something that's been going on for more than just this season. So he's always been a guy who hits left-handed pitching well, always somebody who's in play whenever there's a lefty on the mound. Next guy I think we can look at a little bit is Jeff Locke. Locke struggles with, he's a left-hander. He struggles with right-handed bats. In 2014, he gave up a 274 batting average with 10 home runs in 100 innings. And this year, he's allowed a 279 batting average with 5 home runs in 70 innings. So there's not a ton of home run power that's going to be coming against him. But I think his home ballpark of Pittsburgh, which keeps the ball in the yard, is also something that, contributes to those home run numbers being kind of low. But right-handed bats are definitely the way you want to go after them. When you're thinking about St. Louis, they don't have a ton of right-handed bats, and they actually have pretty bad numbers against lefties so far this year. But there are 2 guys who kind of stand out to me. Yadier Molina is interesting. His batting average is back up over 300 in the last 30 days. He struggled a little bit at the beginning of the year, but he seems to be seeing the ball better and hitting the ball a little bit better now. Like I said, catcher's a tough position to fill. There's not a ton of options there, but I do think that the right-hander Yadier Molina going up against the lefty Jeff Locke is a good matchup for him, and he's a guy who can get you a couple hits, knock in a couple runs as well. I'd only use him where he's cheap, because he's another guy that doesn't have a ton of upside. You're probably not getting a 2-home run game at a Yadier Molina, especially not in either one of these ballparks, St. Louis or Pittsburgh. Maybe if they're playing in Colorado, you can expect that, but definitely not at at either one of those stadiums. So I wouldn't expect it from him tonight. But if you're looking for a cash game option, he is somebody who has a high batting average. He looks like he's getting healthy. He looks like he's back to the old Yadier. And the old Yadier used to be a lot more expensive than the Yadier that we can get today on all these sites is. The other guy to look at is Johnny Peralta. Peralta is probably the one power guy they have from the right side against left-handed pitching. As I said, Locke doesn't give up a ton of home runs, but he does give up a couple. And Peralta does have a lot of power from the right side against left-handed pitching. He is probably the best bat that St. Louis has to throw out there against a lefty, and most likely he's going to be batting in a cleanup spot tonight. Again, he plays shortstop, which is another tough-to-fill position. He homered in last night's game and helped a lot of people who backed him, and it seems like his price is never up there with the elite stars, but it's always a tick above the guys that people try to get with the value. It seems like people either pay up for a guy like a Tulo or a Hanley or a Correa lately, or they go all the way down and punt the position with a guy at 2,400 to 2,800 on DraftKings or 22 to 2,600 over on FanDuel. So this is a position where I think if you go with a guy like Peralta in the middle, you're getting the upside and you're also getting the low ownership, which would be great for you in a tournament. And because he's not too overly expensive, if you can get those big points, that home run out of him in a cash game, you're probably going to be well ahead of your opponent, who most likely is going to be going down and taking one of those cheap options. Last guy I want to discuss is Alex Wood. Alex Wood from the Braves struggles with right-handed bats. They're hitting .301 against him with 6 home runs in 78 innings this year. So he is in Coors Field going up against Colorado. So you got to like a guy like Tulo. Tulo's hitting .415 this year against left-handed pitching. He's hitting, high 300s in the last couple seasons when he's been healthy against left-handers. So hitting left-handed pitching is something Tulo does well. He's got 3 home runs and 65 at-bats this year, but he does hit left-handed pitching for power as well. So I definitely think that he is worth paying up for at the shortstop position today if you can afford to, because this is a great matchup for him against Alex Wood. You also have some other guys that you can consider. A guy like Nolan Arenado is somebody who you want to put in there. Arenado's got a lot of power, doesn't hit for the same average that Tulo does. He's a little more feast or famine, makes him more of a GPP play. The problem you have with Arenado is his price is really high, but that also will help to keep the ownership lower on him. So he's a guy that I think you can take a flyer on in a tournament, hope for a home run, hope for a big day, and a pretty good matchup against Alex Wood. There's a couple other bats you can consider. A guy like Willen Rosario might be a good price saver depending on what site you're playing, if you can get him at the catcher position. He hits left-handed pitching really well. That's pretty much his forte, his bread and butter. A guy like DJ LeMahieu is over 300 against left-handed pitching this year. He doesn't have the power or the upside of some of these other guys, but he could eke out a couple hits for you. And in a high-scoring game in Coors Field, he can score a couple runs and maybe even pick up an RBI if he's in a good spot with guys on. I think that about sums it up for them. There's probably a couple other guys that you can consider. You don't want to take the left-handed bats, so guys like Blackman and Cargo would probably be out of it. But any of those right-handed bats going up against Alex Wood today, I think, are in a good spot. So that pretty much sums it up for our hitter report today. We really don't want to be taking guys against Zach Greinke all that often unless you're trying to be contrarian for a tournament. Jose Fernandez looked good in his first start, so I don't want to be taking too many Cincinnati Reds. Felix Hernandez hasn't been great lately, but he's still Felix Hernandez. He's still not a guy you want to stack bats against. So there's not too many guys on the Angels that I'd be looking for. Carlos Martinez against the Pirates. That one, he's been actually very good over the last couple games. He's had a couple rough spots, but he's been solid enough where I don't want to stack up Pirate bats or really look to target too many Pirate bats going up against them. Same thing goes for Garrett Richards against Seattle. Even though that Seattle team's been hitting a little bit better, Richards has been, he's very underrated. He's been very good this year, and he actually hadn't had a great couple starts over his last few. So if he can get back on track today against the Seattle team that has one of the lowest batting averages in the league against righties and one of the highest K percentages, I think he could be somebody that could be sneaky to be used tonight. I'm interested in seeing what Josh comes up with on the pitching segment. See how he feels about Garrett Richards. Whether he mentions him or not, you guys always know you can join us over in the RotoCurve chat at rotocurve.com. We're usually there between 5 and 7 o'clock before lineup locks, going over some players, going over the lineups that come out, seeing if there's any value guys that open up. And, feel free to come over and answer questions. If you sign up for an account on RotoCurve, it's free, and you'll start earning curve points for your participation in our chats. And the curve points can be traded in for RotoCurve swag. It can be traded in for money that you can use to play on sites. So it's a free bonus that we give to you guys for being part of our community. As always, this has been another edition of Benny's Bats over at rotocurve.com. My name is Benny Ricciardi. You can follow me on Twitter at BennyR11. And thank you for joining us. Stay classy, DFS.